Hello my fellow Total War fans, and welcome to this subscriber-submitted settlement defense battle. This save was sent to me by Cube with a request that I do my best to defend his settlement against a superior invading army. It was a really tough battle and it was even touch and go for a bit, so it's going to be very interesting to showcase. If you would like to send me such battles to play or just replay of battles to review, you can do so at my email perafilozofytsubmissions@gmail.com. You can find the address in the description of this video. Now let's go over this recording and see how I did. I don't do these live because I like to focus on my battles and give better and more detailed tactical breakdown and description of it after the fact. As you can see from the unit cards, the defensive garrison has already taken losses while the enemy army is at full health. They have greater numbers, some of which are of far greater quality than mine. As I look at the settlement, I can see its victory point is secluded in the back of the settlement, which is of great tactical help because I can block off the streets with my army and prevent the enemy from using their greater numbers in a straight up battle. The other part of my battle plan is to send away my weakest units, the ones which would rout the fastest, and use them as a backstabbing force. To get a few good volleys out of the range units, I set them up at the front of my projected battle line. That line is here, and I will place my general and all of my best infantry units here to keep the enemy bottled up in this narrow 2-street passage. I'm going to place one unit behind another one on both sides to give them a future morale bonus for having their flanks secure and fighting alongside friendly units. This will keep them from routing even when outnumbered 5 to 1 at the front. So the plan is very simple, but the execution is going to be the hard part, because I have to time the attack of the backstabbing force perfectly and hope the enemy does blow up as predicted, and also that he does not intercept my weak backstabbers. I'm going to use my fastest game speed now as I await this oncoming horde. As I inspect their stats, I can see which units have the lowest armor rating, and those are the ones I want to target to get the most out of my range units. As the enemy is closing the distance, I'm going back to the regular game speed so I can manually order the range attacks. They are almost in range since the lightest units are the fastest ones. They are exactly the ones I want to take out the most of. The fewer soldiers in a unit, the faster that unit will rout, and because it gives morale debuffs to other enemy units when it routs, this will be the start of a chain rout which I want to achieve. I am going to give manual attack orders to each range unit because they are set in a free to fire mode, which could choose some other unit to target, and then I zoom in to see the effect these volleys are going to have. They're not as effective because of the buildings, but once the unit is around the bend, they will do more damage. Alas, this is all the time they have, and I have to pull them back to the safety of back ranks. What they may not have done in actual damage and enemies killed, they have done in pulling the enemy army closer and making them focus on my main army. This should result in the main infantry blob, which can be surrounded and routed. The important thing is that my backstabbers have been ignored, and now all I have to do is wait for the opportune time to send them on their attack. The slingers and the archers are making their tactical retreat as the first enemy units are closing in for the melee battle to commence. They appear to be spreading out to attack each one of my blockading infantry units, but then a stroke of luck because the enemy AI orders the top unit back. To quickly capitalize on this fortunate turn of events, I charge in with my shielded infantry and finally activate my backstabbers. I just have to hope that I had picked the right moment and that they will arrive just in time to deal their morale damage to the enemy infantry blob, which is already being amassed in the front of my planned battle line. Here again, it is important for my range units to hit the enemy units which are going to be in the thick of the blob, so that even misses will impact other unintended targets and strike through. With the massive infantry blob now in full swing, the AI general is once again ignoring the top street and choosing to bring in even more units on the bottom one. This is where he loses his number superiority and where my chance to win starts. I'm going to send some of my backstabbers to deal with the enemy range units and the rest to attack the main enemy force in the rear. Here we have a serious development as 2 enemy units started to go back for the third passage to the victory point, and I have to send at least one of my weakest units to intercept them. It will not be able to hold them off for long, but I can't allow the enemy to get behind me. Luckily, one of the enemy units went back to the main infantry blob, and I will hammer it into place as soon as my backstabbers get into their position. My one single sword and shield unit, supported by the general, is holding off 6 enemy units at the same time, because only a small percentage of those can actually fight, while the rest can just scream in frustration. As the latest enemy unit joins the blob, I add one more unit to hold off the front and attack with the rest of my units to both flank and the back of it. The backstabbers will now finally fulfill their role, and the rest of them will keep their own rear secure. You can see the plan working and my tactic paying off as the enemy units start to flee before I even complete my encirclement of the main infantry blob. With the encirclement now being total, the main fight is a win, but these units are going to merely rout and not be broken or shattered. This means they can come back as soon as their morale is refreshed, especially since their commander is still in action. My secondary problem are the enemy range units, which are just too tough for my weak Trojan warriors to fight off, let alone rout. This is why I must rely on my main units to finish this fight, which the weak units are making possible. Here you can clearly see the difference of direct and indirect range unit fire, as two of my units are behind the building and must launch projectiles into the air up and over the building, while the other two have clear sights and directly fire at the enemy encircled units. There is this moment of pause in each battle where you have done everything you can and no units can be moved. Here we have come to it now. I use the time to remove the UI and enjoy my handiwork close up. This right here is the reason I fell in love with Total War games 20 years ago and why I still love to play them to this day.
I'll walk all over you!
But alas, a moment would not be a moment if it lasted forever, so we have to go back and control the army. As most of the enemy infantry corps now starts to rout, it is time to reorder my attacks onto units which are still in the fight and force them as well to rout. Now the thing is that because enemy units are much higher quality, just because they are routing now doesn't make this battle over. They will soon get their morale back up, and this is why I have to use this time to take out as many of them while I can as they flee, so I have less of them to deal with when they get back into the combat ready state. This is why I have to order my range units to target these fleeing enemy units and shoot down as many as I can, but also start sending my infantry units after them since they have the guard stance on and will not do so on their own. You can see here just how many enemy units are still alive but their unit is fleeing. This is the power of morale damage. You do not have to kill them to defeat them, you just have to make them lose their will to fight. With their general also fleeing, they are all now routing, but none are broken or shattered, meaning they will come back to the fight as soon as their general does. My Trojan warriors are simply not up to the task of routing enemy slingers, and this is a big problem as range units add morale penalties when they fire on my units, and I do not even have many units to lose.
Your warriors are losing heart!
Here I get somewhat indecisive about what to do next, because while I do want to keep chasing them down and cut them down while they flee, I'm aware that I'm leaving my units exposed and with no backup as they go into every direction. I can already see their units and their general getting their morale back, and this is why I have to regroup back at the center so I can have an orderly battle line for this repeated attack, which is imminent. You can already see the enemy units in the top streets coming back to the fight, and I only have a single unit ready to face them. This is why I stop them and have them bait for backup as I try to find units which I can pull to the defensive and keep my range units protected. This is a very dangerous moment in the battle because now I am the one who is getting slowly surrounded by the enemies who are coming back from multiple directions while my units are damaged, some are fighting alone and exposed while my general is at half the health and my range units are getting low on ammo. My weakest units, the Trojan warriors, are getting routed and destroyed, and this will free up more enemy units for the second attack, which is going to be a lot harder to fight off as I cannot find any units to do the flank or rear attacks. The saving grace here is the fact that the enemy is not attacking at once, but only with a few units at a time as they stop routing at different times. Some of my units are still chasing off his routing ones, while others have already engaged in close combat battles. My range units provide the invaluable help to my depleted infantry units as they are not only going to take out the enemy soldiers, but also impart morale penalties which will help making a second enemy rout possible. This time around they do get shattered, represented by the skull icon on their unit flag, and that means that they are out of this battle for good. As the top side is now secure, I have to see what can be done about the enemy units now regrouping at the bottom of the settlement, where only one of my Trojan warriors are fighting a losing staying off action, and as soon as they break, the enemy will once again push up towards my range units, which are still getting hit volley after volley after volley by the enemy slingers. One of my reformed Trojan warriors might just do the trick to keep them busy, but I need to make sure to get my units outside of their range and set up at the center to await the final enemy push. Reforming your battle line like this in the middle of the battle is a good thing for several reasons. They get to rest up and regenerate their stamina, which they need for running and fighting, they get some morale backup because they are in the midst of friendly units, and most important of all, they can act as a unified force when the battle commences again and guard each other's flanks and rear. The enemy general is just too tough for my Trojan warriors and he will be able to defeat them single-handedly. But that is to be expected and counted on, as they are giving their lives so my most valuable units can get some breathing room and set up alongside my range units and the general to await the enemy. You have to be very careful when choosing where to fight the second battle, as a wrong choice of terrain or a bad unit formation can be the difference between a successful defense and a total failure. Your units will also not be able to absorb many losses, as they have already been through a tough fight, and a few losses here and there could be enough for a unit to rout, and if one goes, the other ones will fall like dominoes. This is why I have to carefully manage which of my remaining infantry units will fight head-on and choose the most numerous ones. I also do not go straight into the fight, but let my range units fire off as many volleys as possible to soften up the enemy units. With no help from my other units to do flank or rear attacks for morale penalties, I have to find other ways of reducing enemy morale. While in some previous Total War games, a unit getting shot and not in combat would lose its morale until it routs if it's not engaged in melee combat already, here in Troy this isn't the case. A unit will keep coming on even when taking continuous fire from range units. As you can see here, both my army and the enemy's is formed up, and the second combat of this battle, which I've been talking about, is about to commence. The enemy hero, general, commander, however you wanna call him, is quite brave and is leading the charge. Now, I could play this a bit smarter and let him just come to me and fight my shielded infantry, but I go with the flow of the battle and send my own general into a duel. I love to play these battles out as tactically sound as possible, but sometimes even I cannot resist spicing it all up with a bit of theater. I'm going to make sure that each one of my range units has a different target, as to spread those morale penalties around and meet the enemy infantry units in frontal combat with the hopes of doing at least a little bit of maneuvering to just maybe pull a bit of a flank attack here and there to get them to rout faster.
The foe is capturing your victory point.
I was really surprised when I heard that the enemy was capturing my victory point, which I left totally unguarded, but luckily it was only a routing unit accidentally running into it. It is a bit strange that a routing unit would trigger a victory point being captured warning, but we'll chalk that up to a bug which will be ironed out later. As my units managed to shatter one enemy flank, I have a unit freed up for a rear attack, and this is looking like a sure win at this point. But being overconfident is the Achilles heel of every general, and what I didn't notice was the fact that that unit chose a totally wrong path to attack the enemy units. To that unit, it was shorter and faster to actually go back and then go into the backs of my own units, which created a dangerous moment in this battle where everything could have gone horribly wrong. I attempt to find a use for the sword unit somehow, but the street was already full of soldiers and there is no room for it in the frontal fight. I had to bite down my anger and just wait to see the resolution. It all turned out good, as the enemy infantry unit was shattered and that left only one of the enemies to be defeated, but this should be an example to you just how precarious battles can be, and one simple misclick can cost you an entire battle even if you had played it flawlessly up to that point. With 3 of my units against one of the enemies, it doesn't take long for it to be shattered, and that just leaves the enemy slingers and general in play. They get swarmed with the remainder of my infantry units, and that brings this battle to a close. I hope you have enjoyed this video and invite you to send me more such battles to play or review. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!